CTV can be as bad as the CBC sometimes. They're both pillars of the media party, as I call it. So I ought to tell you of a very good interview I saw on the CTV a few days ago that I'd like to note, not only because it was interesting, but because it was allowed to happen at all on CTV. Laurie Graham was interviewing the new Liberal health minister about the 50,000 Muslim migrants that are being rushed to Canada from Syria. Yeah, just in case you missed it, the number was increased from 25,000 to 35,000, now to 50,000 Muslims from Syria in the next 13 months. Don't you feel safe? Anyways, there are a lot of security questions to be asked, especially in light of the terrorist attacks in Los Angeles, where the female jihadist was vetted for terrorism by the US government, but obviously not stopped. Oh, and the terrorist attacks in Paris, where several of the terrorists came into the country as refugees too. But this interview was about health. Here's one question that was interesting. Will you let people into Canada with extremely contagious third world diseases like tuberculosis? Take a look at the answer.
And so what if people were found to have tuberculosis, which we know is treatable but highly contagious, and other issues? Will some people be denied access? Will they be quarantined? How will you deal with that?
It depends on which stage in the process an identification is made in terms of an infectious disease. And as you say, most of the infectious diseases we're looking at are quite treatable, and so obviously we wouldn't encourage people to travel if they are currently infectious. We would make sure that they get appropriate treatment. It would not lead to a denial as a cause in itself of being able to be accepted as a refugee and welcomed to Canada, but it may delay somebody's travel. And of course, as people arrive in Canada, there will be further screening, and we'll just make sure that everyone is healthy.
She actually said yes. Canadian government will actually let people into Canada from Syria with severely infectious, deadly diseases like tuberculosis. Oh, but she said it with a smile, so it's okay, right? And if you disagree, you're a racist, right? Tuberculosis doesn't care what race you are, what religion you are, of course. It will infect anyone, kill anyone, but it's our duty to multiculturalism to bring in people with tuberculosis. Oh my God, but really, why even screen for it if you're gonna let them in anyways? I mean, why even vet people? This is madness. But here's the second strong question by Laurie Graham. What about post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD? Our Canadian veterans have a tough time getting the psychological help they need to cope with things they saw and did over in Afghanistan. So our vets are facing a shortage of health care. So is it really wise to bring in 50,000 queue jumpers, a lot of who probably have psychological trauma too? Here's what the health minister said.
Sometimes we find that it takes some time before those mental health conditions come to the surface, and so we'll need to make sure that healthcare providers in Canada are prepared for the fact that it may be even months after arrival in Canada that people will be suffering from some of the anxieties and memories that they've had of the difficulties they've been through, and so we are making sure that people are fully prepared for that and that we'll have counseling services in place.
So no problem, just bring them in. We can handle it. 50,000 more patients who speak Arabic. Oh yeah, that won't strain the system. Did you catch the part about the problems not even showing up for several months? See, that's the thing about rushing people in for an artificial deadline. It used to take about 10 months or more for a refugee to be properly processed and vetted. If someone was nuts, we'd find out before we brought them over, but if you're in a political rush to bring in as many Muslim men as you can, you will bring in the nuts and only learn about it later. And again, with that soft, dumb smile, hey, does anyone even think about risk these days? Does anyone think it's a bit risky to bring in tens of thousands of young Muslim men from war-torn Syria, many of whom have psychological problems? Oh, a little bit of risk, but Canada's health minister doesn't say so, and she's smiling, so it's okay. Okay, one last question, again a good one by Laurie Graham. What about doctor shortages that we already have now?
But what do you do in those communities where there are doctor shortages to begin with, and Canadians themselves are having problems, accessing their own health care? Now you're bringing in hundreds to some communities, potentially thousands. With that kind of influx, when there's already some problems accessing doctors, for example, with Canadians themselves.
Well, as you know, in my portfolio as health minister, I am committed to making sure that Canadians receive the health care that they need, and I do acknowledge that there are places where there are shortages, and those are some of the things that I will be helping to address over my mandate. Obviously, my provincial counterparts are very much committed to making sure that all of the folks within their jurisdiction also have the health care that they need.
So no real answer for that other than some more gray fog. In other words, they have no clue. In other words, Canadians will get to the back of the line, because if you don't, you're a racist. If you're worried about tuberculosis, you're a racist. If you're worried about a bunch of PTSD crazies from Syria, you're racist. If you resent being a lifelong citizen and taxpayer, and now you're pushed to the back of a hospital waiting list for a Liberal vote-buying scheme, you're a racist. Vote buying, that's what this is. The immigration minister said it's going to cost about $1.2 billion to bring in the first 25,000 refugees. That works out to $200,000 for a family of 4. But hey, they'll be Liberal voters for life. What are you going to do about that, you racist? For TheRebel.media, I'm Ezra Levant.